I would say emotional intelligence could be divided to two other intelligences. So it's intrapersonal and interpersonal intelligences. Emotions carry some sort of message, some sort of meaning behind it. And that's why we avoid saying the emotion is either good or bad.
There are relationships, conflicts, which I believe can be better managed when we not only rely on pure logic, but also take in considerations the feelings.
Welcome to the Volunteer Support Podcast, brought to you by the European Union's co-funded project Promptus.edu, a collaboration between associations Audis Out Mori and Building Bridges.
Welcome to Volunteer Support Podcast, where we address common volunteer questions and concerns for both volunteers and sending-receiving organizations. This episode is dedicated to talk about emotional intelligence in workplace, how to navigate interpersonal relationships. And here with you is Audi South Mori team, me, Gabriele, and Tadas.
Hello.
And we have very special guest, Mykolas. Mykolas is the head of Youth Emotional Support Line in Kaunas. He is taking care of teachers and hundreds of volunteers. He dedicated many hours to listen to people in need by giving them emotional support. Hi, Mykolas.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm fine. I'm a little bit tired, but I'm excited for this because it's quite unusual for me to be on a podcast, so I'm quite excited what's coming up.
Could you please tell us a little bit more? What do you do? About your work, about projects you do, and Youthline.
Okay. So Youthline is, as you said, an emotional support hotline, which is available 24/7, which basically when young people are experiencing crisis, emotional crisis, they can call or write to us via phone or via chat to talk through their feelings, to talk through their emotions, to talk through their struggles that they are experiencing. So it may concern either suicide or may concern other emotional crises. So we are a volunteer-based organization. We have over 400 volunteers in Lithuania, in Kaunas, of which branch I'm the head of. We have around 130 volunteers. So I'm in charge of all those volunteers that are volunteering in Kaunas.
Impressive.
So we do a lot of things. The main focus, of course, is emotional support for people who call and write to us, but also, as you said, there are teachers that are teaching the new volunteers as well as the current volunteers. There are mentors that are helping both new and older volunteers to go into the community, to bond with each other. There are people who are concerned with the quality of our emotional support. So there are many layers to this, and I'm in charge of all those layers, all those lines of work to get them to coalesce into one big organization when we can provide emotional support towards young people.
That's really impressive. I thought just to get us into the topic, do you use emotional intelligence, and how important emotional intelligence in your position here?
Okay, regarding emotional intelligence, I don't usually think every day that, either I'm emotionally intelligent or not, whether something I'm doing is emotionally intelligent or not. But when I think about it now, when we talked about this podcast, I thought through it. And yes, I think emotional intelligence, as broadly as we may define it, I think is extremely important both in my line of work, which concerns, of course, volunteers with their well-being, and in any other line of work probably. So I think to answer yes or no, I think yes. I do use emotional intelligence. Maybe we can broaden it out later on, but I think it's very important especially when dealing with people in any kind of work.
Yes. I thought just whenever we are at work, us or volunteers, we spend significant amount of time at workplace, and naturally we experience a lot of emotions and feelings. Some of them can be more pleasant, some of them will be less pleasant. There are feelings, relationships, conflicts, which I believe can be better managed when we not only rely on pure logic, but also take in considerations the feelings that is around them. And emotional intelligence is a skill that can be beneficial to build a new relationship when you get to a new country, new work, and so on. So my question for all of us would be, how do you understand emotional intelligence, and why do you think it's important in workplace?
Emotional intelligence is a skill in which you understand your emotions, your motivations, and also other people's emotions. You have empathy, and you are able to make connections and just understand reasoning why that person is doing such thing and so on. But at the same time, I would say emotional intelligence could be divided to two other intelligences. So it's intrapersonal and interpersonal intelligence. So intrapersonal is about yourself, understanding your own feelings. And then interpersonal is about intelligence, understanding other people's emotions. And the skill of intrapersonal intelligence is helping to achieve competencies in interpersonal intelligence, because when you understand your own emotions, you are better to understand other person's emotions. Because even though we are different, but we are much more similar than different, and the feelings and a lot of the things are very common between us.
Okay.
Very good answer. I would maybe add to this, because I think it's a very detailed answer that you gave. I'm always thinking whether we should separate the emotional intelligence and, I don't know, logic, reasoning, or something to different parts, because all the decisions that we make, they both need emotional intelligence, they need logic, they need all sorts of rational thinking. We like to think of ourselves as rational beings. Usually psychology says that we aren't really always rational, that there's irrationality in us. We can just think about everyday lives. When we are like mad or sad, it's usually difficult to make some kinds of decisions, or you make maybe errors in our decisions. It's very important to know when we are feeling this or that way. It's very beneficial to also know what causes it and how it influences us, those emotions, those feelings, the things that we experience. So I wouldn't really separate emotional intelligence and like usual intelligence that we talk about.
I totally agree. There is even a research that showed that without emotional intelligence, people had the worse result of rational intelligence. So it's very interconnected. And it's not that we have a heart or brain, like everything in the same system. Like it's brain, it's nervous system, and it's all very interconnected. And some people are saying, oh, there are 8 intelligences, 9 intelligences. It doesn't matter that much, I would say. There are some words we categorize, we analyze it that way, but in this way we are reducing some information to be able to have that scheme for us to better understand, but it's just a whole system that is very interconnected. So I totally agree with you that it's part of the whole system, and it shouldn't be like, oh, just emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And as I was reading more about emotional intelligence, it was also mentioned that it's to recognize feelings of your own and to recognize in other people, but also to be able to use that feeling and to know how to be with it. So I think it's like superpower or very useful skill. Oh, okay, I know how to manage my anger. I know how to manage other feelings. And this is also included into emotional intelligence, to know how to deal with your feelings and also the other person. And of course, we cannot manage another person's feelings, but maybe we can understand the reasoning behind it. To understand ourselves better, I prepared some kind of questionnaires to understand what level is my emotional intelligence. And this question is not yes or no. You can just level yourself. Okay, in what way is it easy for me? In what ways maybe is it harder? And this questionnaire is to evaluate 4 categories: your self-awareness, self-regulation, social awareness or empathy, and social skills. I will start with the first one. It's the question of self-awareness. Are you aware of emotions and triggers of yours? I think it's really important question to understand, okay, what is triggering me? And maybe to prepare yourself if you know some kind of situations are usually a trigger for me.
So I would say that sometimes I'm aware of that, sometimes I'm not. But when I'm not aware, I don't remember that probably. But what I can notice that I can see quite a lot of people that are not aware. They are just angry because maybe they are tired, lots of work and so on. But then you are seeing that it's spreading all around, and yeah, the result of it.
Yeah.
It's like that.
And usually people may deny that they are feeling in some sort of way, because some people were not allowed to be angry or to be sad, disappointed, or so on. So it's sometimes easy to deny yourself as a feeling of some sort. Like, maybe I'm not the person who gets sad, but everyone gets sad. But if we don't allow ourselves to feel a certain kind of emotion, it kind of hinders our well-being usually.
And some triggers may surprise. For example, I myself, for a really long time, I felt, oh no, I'm really calm. I can accept everyone. No situation is really affecting me. But then life surprises me. And I realized, okay, I really feel angry at this person or this situation. And this is new about me. And okay, I didn't notice about it myself. But I realized, yeah, I need the recognition if I did the work. That these triggers are not something bad, but they are telling you information about yourself. But it's good to recognize and maybe to prepare yourself if you know that you will get triggered. Another question is, can you identify specific emotions of your experience in difficult situations? I think this question is very related to the vocabulary that you have. Sometimes we know some sensations in our body, but we cannot name them. And
how are you feeling? Good, bad, normal?
Yeah.
These are the bad words in your life.
Yes. In our organization, it's one of the first things that we do. It's called the vocabulary of emotions, or vocabulary of feelings, because usually people know the three main emotions, as you said, the good, the bad, and the normal ones. Sometimes with swear words, sometimes without them. And it's also really based on research, because when people can identify their emotions as concretely as they can, as specifically as they can, whether I'm feeling disappointed, whether I'm feeling happy, elated, there are hundreds probably of words in any kind of language for emotions. The more specifically that you can identify your emotion, the more you can control it, the more you can recognize it, the more it doesn't control you, you can control it, or at least your response to it. So it's very beneficial to have that vocabulary in you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a symptom, and you can understand what's behind there.
Yeah,
like a message.
Yeah, it's usually, that's what it's said about emotions, because they carry some sort of message, some sort of meaning behind it. And that's why we avoid saying the emotion is either good or bad, because there aren't really any good ones or bad ones. There are just messages that they are carrying with them.
We can't say water is bad or good.
Yeah.
Like it's also carrying lots of stuff in our body. It's just like that. And for example, we can analyze like anger, as you, Gabriela, mentioned. So it's also not about that other person, it's about yourself. How are you reacting? Maybe you are reacting because you are seeing something that is similar to the things that you don't like about yourself. Maybe it's some situation from your childhood that is just affecting that experience.
Yeah.
And so on.
Absolutely. Anger is usually associated with someone is trying to invade our boundaries. Like someone maybe did something to us or to someone we love, but it's usually related to boundaries. And it's usually when we can recognize it and we can act it out in an appropriate way, maybe not going to fight someone, but maybe just telling someone how we're feeling. It's usually more beneficial both to us and in an interpersonal relationship as well.
Mm-hmm. What was quite strange about the anger when I was having lecture of psychology in medical university, in the group we divided, like I understood that anger is about yourself, feeling of that, as the lecturer said, but quite a lot of people was opposing that. No, I'm angry because that person did that. So its understanding of that is also very challenging.
Yes.
I have another questions to evaluate the self-regulation. And maybe we can answer for ourselves. At what level can you maintain composure under pressure or stress? So it's also related to your management of the emotion and maybe the resources.
Yeah, resources, stress, even like the next level of stress we can see burnout is also ability to understand where are you going with your life. If you understand the signals, the symptoms of emotions earlier, you can prevent those results that is very destructive even, or like affecting very much negatively your quality of life.
Yeah. And also, I think it's nothing new here, but the balance in your life when you have especially stressful situations, because recently in the past year I had quite a few stressful situations at work, and there were problems to solve where you could solve them 24/7. You could spend entire evenings, entire weekends doing them, but I once again found out how important it is to do things outside of work or outside of things that cause you stress. Every day I used to go for a walk with my dog because I knew otherwise I will go maybe insane just thinking constantly about the things that stress us. So it's sometimes extremely important when something is extremely intense, if there is a possibility to step back a little bit. It doesn't mean avoid it, it doesn't mean deny it, but maybe stepping back, seeing the bigger picture. Why am I stressing about it? It may be very beneficial in this kind of bigger picture. Yeah.
But were you able to not think about the work when you were walking with dog?
I would say no. But even the physical activity itself, even doing some different kind of activity than just sitting near my computer or talking to my colleagues that were in the same hell as me, it expanded my view. After I used to walk with my dog, or after I would go for a run, or maybe I would go to, I don't know what I would do, to go to the movies, for example, I would probably not spend a single minute not thinking about the stressful things. But again, it would give me a sort of different point of view, which would let me maybe tackle the problem a little bit differently. And that was beneficial.
Yeah, I totally agree. That sounds very beneficial.
I think for the regulation part, maybe it's good to have some kind of options for you, what's working and not working. And if you find yourself in a stressful situation, to have what to choose from. Just know, okay, this is the part of my life that is needed for this or that.
Yeah. I heard in one lecture, the psychologist recommended to have a list, like 5 or 10 things that you really like to do when you're feeling like comfortable and relaxing and so on. And take that list when you're very stressed and just do something of that list. And you can just get more energy, as you said.
Yeah, and I think that list should be prepared when we are feeling fine, when we are not in a stressful zone, but when we are feeling fine, because at one point or another, whatever kind of work we do, whatever kind of things we are studying, we will encounter stressful situations, and when we encounter them, it's very difficult to think of things. What would I like to do? What causes me joy? It's very difficult to think about it. Yeah. But if you prepare the list beforehand, okay, this is what I like to do when I'm not stressed. Maybe this is what I like to do just in general. Having that list, breaking in case of an emergency, taking it, using it, it may make your life a little bit easier than just being stressed and stressing even more, not being able to think what causes me joy or relief or something like that.
Okay. Other questions for another category is social awareness and empathy. Are you attentive to nonverbal cues and body language? For example, me, I'm very attentive to words and the logic behind it. I completely forget about in what way was their feet or what kind of body position. And I realize when I'm speaking, I also very intensely focused on the meaning behind my words. And sometimes I speak too quickly. Sometimes my body is not showing the message that what I'm intended to. So
I wouldn't agree. I would say that Gabriela is showing with body language quite similar. But what I thought that if the body language is very different from the things that you are saying, I would say that person is lying then. Because it just, body language sometimes shows more than you are saying. You can lie with your words, but it's much harder to lie with your body language. At least that's what I noticed.
Yeah, that can be. I think in recent years, people especially started to pay attention to the so-called non-verbal communication, how where our eyes go, where our feet go, how much we gesture. But it's also important to keep in mind that one of the main things is cultural differences also in this topic, because there are many cultural differences. And I recently, again, been on a few lectures, especially about the nonverbal communication. It's very easy to, not with words, but with our, hands, gestures of some sort, mimics, because in every culture in Lithuania, it may be very different than in other European or non-European country as well.
Like Bulgaria and some other countries, when they are nodding, it's no, and it's just the reverse that we are used to.
Yeah, so I think, again, nonverbal communication carries an important message, and I think we shouldn't ignore it. But I remember I used to really like this TV show Lie to Me, and it was all about the body language of like when someone is lying, what someone is meaning. So it's not really a complete evidence-based science, but it is a kind of supplement also to the verbal communication, and it's quite important, yes.
Yes. So another question would be, can you accurately assess the emotion state of those around you, or are you able to put yourself in another person's shoes? So this is really to evaluate your empathy skills and relationship management. And empathy is a part of emotional intelligence. So to evaluate those, maybe we can answer, can you communicate your feelings and needs clearly and accessibly? I think first you have to recognize the needs, but then are you able to communicate them? That's another question. The fluently of your speech.
Yeah, that's like linguistic intelligence, so that's a separate one. You may not have skills of that.
Yeah, sometimes we may feel what our needs are, what we expect from other people, but it may be difficult to communicate. I know I struggle with it a lot. It's usually in my job, maybe not in this job, but my job as a psychologist as well. I tend to notice that the people whose needs haven't been met when they were like children or earlier on, it's especially difficult to communicate those needs, because you may not feel that you can have needs, that someone could respond to them. Sometimes we have to learn this way of speaking, this way of communicating very late in our lives, but I know it's possible, but it's something that I struggle a lot. Yeah.
And it depends on the community surrounding you. If no one is speaking and expressing clearly their wishes, feelings, and needs, and you go to a psychologist or some kind of group where they are speaking openly about their feelings, needs, and whatever, sometimes you feel artificially doing it. Not necessarily this is artificial, but I think it's just because we are so unused to that. Another question would be, how do you handle conflicts and disagreements within relationships? So it's a part of emotional intelligence, and I think it's a skill to have a productive disagreement and find the solutions together, not just stick only with your own answer and your own opinion, but be open enough to hear another person. And if you disagree, say that you disagree in what way without hurting their feelings. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it may be informative in terms of conflicts and disagreements, whether people go into them or avoid them also, because there are a lot of people that just avoid conflicts, and there are a lot of like people or couples that say we never have conflicts, and sometimes it's because they just agree with one another like completely and perfectly, but sometimes it's because they avoid something and there are very like intense undercurrents between them and sometimes it can blow up, sometimes it may result in many disagreements. So it's not only in relationships, it may be inside workplaces and so on. So it's also very important to define and to recognize whether you avoid conflicts or whether you go into them, and what kind of conflicts you can handle, what kinds of you can't handle, because when you are dealing with interpersonal situations, they are just unavoidable.
Personally, I quite often avoid conflicts, and that's because of my childhood. I used to that because I saw conflicts between my parents, and the conflict for me is like negative experience, and I have to avoid that. And of course I have conflicts, but I still try to avoid that. And I try I'm not sure actually if I'm trying, but there's very few people that I really can't understand and can't communicate in a way that is affecting negatively me. It's like some people are complaining, oh, that person is like that and that. I'm just seeing, okay, that person is quite nice in this and that way, and I can just find some part that I can relate to that person and to make connection. And when you were talking about the conflicts, I remembered that it's much better to have conflicts on the scale from 1 to 10 to have low points, like 2, 3 points conflicts is just you are sensing something, you're making a conflict, but it's not like 9 points conflict when you already like 10 years in marriage and so on, and the conflict is about all those 10 years, so it's like you can't solve all the problems when it's like that much of the emotions that was just kept inside and not communicated. And then you have
divorce.
Then you have divorce because you can't solve it. If you don't have the skill to say it through those years, then you're having like a lot of emotions. It's just too much. So to have ability to communicate in the process is very useful. And it's quite similar in the workplace actually, because we can have some people that is working in the same place for 30 years and is not saying anything that is negatively affecting them. They might communicate it with the same level position, just complaining when drinking tea or coffee, but not expressing what is actually wrong, what can be changed. And this kind of just emotional ventilation is not changing the workplace, and it's affecting lots of people. So it's also quite destructive.
I'm thinking if for a long time you are not expressing the anger or you're not bringing the conflict into the air, the resentment is building, and therefore the relationships cannot go smooth, open, and so on. And I remember there was a lecture that I was listening to where the person was talking about organizations and how it's important to get and give a feedback, because it's just like in your body. The organization, the workplace is just like your body, and if your body would not give you signals, let's say you put your finger to the fire and this finger would be like, no, I'm gonna be nice and I'm not gonna tell it, I'm gonna fix it myself. And let's say you are not giving the feedback that is needed for the whole organization, for the whole team, and you just, okay, I'll do it myself. Maybe that finger would fall off. I'm not a medical professional, but this is not good for you, this is not good for the team. To give the feedback is a skill, and it's really important and can benefit your career, your volunteering experience, and so on.
So there are some data that the emotional intelligence, the skills of communicating about your emotions, about also understanding other people's emotions, is quite important in the workplace. We are thinking about people that is working together. Usually they have quite similar background, like the university and so on. So the IQ of them could be quite similar. And when you are having similar IQ, then emotional intelligence is quite important differentiator that can define in which position will you be. Because if you in the executive positions, it is good to have emotional intelligence, because you have to manage people, and to manage people you have to understand how they are feeling, how you are feeling, because your emotions could also affect them. So it's for sure there is a relation to that. But at the same time, when I said that, I noticed that in my experience in the hospitals, it is not always the case. Maybe some other characteristics is affecting. In the medical sphere, it's also about the research. If you're doing the research, if you're becoming professor, then you have that ability. But to do research, it's not the same as to be able to communicate with other colleagues, understand and then motivate them as we are talking. So emotional intelligence is another skill. So it's very nice to have a supervisor with high emotional intelligence, but not all of us are able to have it.
Yeah, I think two things can be true at the same time in this situation where I think emotional intelligence, especially as you work higher up, when you are a leader of people, and even if it's an entry-level position, I think it's an extremely important thing because it impacts how people feel around you. It impacts how you feel around other people, how you communicate, how you work in different environments. But also, I think can be true that people having zero emotional intelligence can become leaders. We always hear about like geniuses and billionaires who are very mean to their employees, who are very mean to the public in general, and they become like geniuses, quote unquote. But they have different sorts of skills and they are usually not very pleasant to be around. And it sometimes comes down to what we are trying to achieve in our workplace. And in my experience and a lot of people experience that I know, the emotional intelligence part is very important to bring your career up and for it to be like stable and for other people to reach out to you. It really helps you, even if you maybe you're just starting your job and it may be an entry-level position, but when people feel well around you and you care about other people in workplaces, it really is helpful.
So I think it comes to a question that what role does emotional intelligence play in resolving conflicts within a team?
So a huge role, because when you have a conflict in the workplace, if you're part of that conflict, for sure you have to understand your own emotions, how you're feeling, why you are feeling, what's happening, and then the interpersonal intelligence can help you to emphasize with other people how they are feeling, why they are feeling, and the reasoning behind that.
I think sometimes it's easier just to put a label on a person. He's a bad coworker, he's lazy or incompetent. I personally find it easier when I start to get angry and I start to feel like that I'm putting just a label, okay, you just want to ruin my project or you just want to do something harmful. Okay, but this is my coworker. I assume he wants to be in the team of ours and to get to the result that all of our team wants. Okay, so I'm trying to understand what was your reasoning behind it. Why do you think this is the way? And if I feel like the answer is not logical for me, I'm trying to say it, okay, but in what way you're thinking this is going to work? Because in my head, I'm thinking if we'll do this and this will happen. And even if it sounds like a stupid idea, maybe I can understand better. And I'm not feeling angry at that person as I understand what it's coming from.
And I think, regarding conflicts and thinking about emotional intelligence, yes, emotional intelligence is extremely important because of knowing the emotions, because of the basic emotional intelligence, we can see the sort of undercurrents. It's usually said it's not what you're fighting about, but it's what you're fighting for. Like in romantic relationships, it's usually we are fighting because of who didn't take out the trash or something like that. But in that case, we are fighting for maybe I wasn't recognized, maybe I wasn't seen, maybe I wasn't heard, maybe I was ignored or something like that. In workplace environments, it may also be about that. Like we may start fighting because of the processes are very different between us. But it may be, again, because I wasn't recognized by my boss, maybe because I feel not seen or ignored in my team, and so on and so forth. So it's very important to see why we are fighting for. And it's also your example, I think it's it really, illustrates when it is sometimes said that I'm not fighting for myself, you're not fighting for yourself, but we are fighting for our relationship because it's something bigger than both me and you combined, but it's because of a relationship or because like in a workplace environment, maybe because of a result, and the conflict can with the relationship, the result can withstand the conflict. Like it's not a personal conflict, but it may be a conflict that is directed toward making the best version of a product possible, best version of something possible. So it's very important to tell yourself first and foremost, but also to talk about the people that you're fighting with, to find the common ground, like what are we fighting for? And because it's the first thing that we start fighting about, it's usually not the reason we are fighting for, but it's usually maybe deeper underground because of it.
And this reasoning unites us, makes us a team and helps to put a perspective.
Yeah, it may sometimes cool a conflict, sometimes not. I'm thinking about like my personal experience. Sometimes volunteers come up to me because they are unhappy or mad or sad or some reason. It's the way I approach it is usually talking about the feelings that they're feeling, but it's I would say 99% of the time it's usually okay. They felt they were not like seen, for example, because they did something and either me or someone else didn't compliment them or didn't give them anything in return or something. There may be a lot of reasons behind it, but it may start with an emotion, but there are some things deeper under the water.
And as I understand, they were not aware of those feelings.
Usually not. And I think it may be quite unusual if we came up to another person, especially if we don't have a deep relationship with them, to come up and say, I don't know, I feel I wasn't heard or I wasn't seen, especially if it's, I don't know, your boss, for example, or someone. Maybe it's more common in interpersonal relationships, romantic relationships between friends and so on. But it's also regarding a workplace. I feel very lucky to work in a workplace that is also concerned with feelings. So I live in a sort of bubble, but I also see that it's a culture that promotes it. When it's a culture, when the emotional support lines, the leader is very emotionally intelligent, I can tell you that. It's very easy to talk with her about things that arise. It's very easy to talk with people around her and in all the organization about the things that arise. So it's a cultural thing, but again, I liked when you said at first that it may feel artificial at first, talking about the feelings, the conflicts, the reasonings, but with practice, with time, it becomes like sort of second nature to talk about them.
And that's what I wanted to ask you, like, how do you help volunteer that is overwhelmed, that is stressed and maybe overworked and comes to you and say, oh, I want to quit. How do you approach that? How would you?
Difficult. I work here for 4 years and it's every kind of situation is unique in itself. But to generalize it, one, because it's a volunteer-based organization, it's difficult to liken it to like any companies where people are paid money, because sometimes, as you said, yes, people come for money and stay for money and they might throw out the 8 hours away, but the pay is good and they get good money and maybe justifies the rest of the life. With volunteering, it's usually something people do on top of other things that they are doing. Usually it's either studying or working or being a parent or having any sorts of activities. It's like usually the volunteers have 10 more activities that sometimes we are aware of, sometimes we are not. It's very natural to understand that when some stressful things happen in their lives, it may be one of the first things to go, the volunteering part. But also, we are very proud because in our organization, the community is very strong. The people have very strong bonds between each other. We have very strong teams. We try to build those teams up. So sometimes, because of lack of time, lack of resources, people may want to quit the volunteering, but also the community can be a resource for them in those stressful times. There were situations when parents died or they lost their jobs, divorces, and so on. These are very stressful situations. And we usually talk through with people, and I try to be as flexible as possible in those situations, because if we find that the person maybe is having a crisis of some sort, again, like a death or a loss of job or something, we may agree for half a year of vacation or sort of stepping back from the volunteering. But sometimes we find different things for them to do, because again, like when you are having a crisis yourself, to talk with people who are calling to us having a crisis, it may be harmful to those people, to the volunteers themselves. So we try to like sometimes find some different things for them to do within the organization. Maybe you can promote our organization. Maybe you can do some kind of activities that don't involve a lot of emotional resources, but may help you to get the resource from us of some sort. So both me and us as an organization, we try to be flexible about it because we care for our volunteers. But again, sometimes people just come up to me like, again, either angry or sad because of some things, and it's sure that they have no more either time or resources of some sort to give to the volunteering. So the only thing to do is to say goodbye. And there were very few instances where we said goodbye, I don't know, angry or something. It's a beautiful separation, if you can call it. But yeah, sometimes people, again, volunteering is a stage of life, usually. It may go on for a few months, it may go on for a few decades, but sometimes people just come to their natural end. But when it's a stage where they're in crisis, we really try to help them to navigate through it.
To build this relationship within teams, within our organization, I think it takes years. But maybe you can share at least some practices that could help to build an organization that volunteers would feel welcome to.
I think at first it starts with purpose. What do the people who come to volunteer, do they feel the purpose in their jobs? And usually volunteering is synonymous to having a purpose in life. So when we agree to a common purpose in our organization, to help people who struggle, to help people who are in crisis, it's easier to bring them together and to promote the bonding, the shared experiences, and so on. But I agree it takes time, it takes effort. Advices that I think of, one is just having basic patience and just inviting people, whether they like it or not, to things. Maybe not telling them you have to come to things, but usually having resilience. Okay, you don't want to come today, maybe you come tomorrow, maybe you come to the next thing, because the hardest part to get into the community is the first time that you step into the community. Because when the first time, okay, it's safe, it's people are happy or people are very varied, some talk a lot, some don't talk a lot, but seeing them for the first time is a very important thing. So we have mentors for that, people who have personal relationships to every single volunteer. So this is a very helpful tip, helpful for every organization. I myself could not handle 130 people by myself, so I have mentors who have 9, 8 to 10 people who they have a personal relationship with, and they can get to know them, maybe get to know what they want from us, what they don't want from us. It's much more easy to invite them to some things. And also realizing that people's needs change. Again, in our place, people, they come for a year, maybe for 2 years. It's very interesting to them to talk to people who are struggling, to give the emotional support. But it's natural that it becomes less interesting. However purposeful the practice, the activities itself, but sometimes people want more. So it's very important to bring them into a broader organization. Maybe they want to be teachers and teach other people, train other people to become volunteers. Maybe they want to become mentors. Maybe they want to be concerned with the quality of our emotional support. Maybe they want to do other sorts of things. So again, the constant communication with them, the constant figuring out what their needs are, as well as figuring out what the organization's needs are, because everything cannot be met, but we are looking for compromises. I think it's a very important step, but it's never an exact science, again, but it takes work, it takes effort, but it's always worth it.
So it's that the exchange would be both ways. You are giving something, but then you are getting something.
Yes, and we try to talk about it openly, because yes, volunteers are not employees. You cannot tell them to do something because they signed a paper or they get money for it, because they can walk out whenever they want. And I'm really proud of the organization itself, and I'm proud of volunteers that they spend the time, they spend the effort, some more, some less, but they're spending their free time basically to give back to the community, to people who need it.
And probably the people that volunteered, even after volunteering, they are spreading the information about how the organization is working and the things they learned and so on. So that's also a positive side effect.
Yeah, we talked about it a lot, that it's a big contribution of us that we have throughout our 30-year history. We have answered literally millions of calls from people in distress. But one of the greatest legacies that we have is that in the world there are thousands of volunteers, ex-volunteers, though we say there are no ex-volunteers. Everyone is related to the organization. But they are spreading the word, but they are spreading the emotional intelligence that we talked about. Every single one of them has learned active listening. Every single one of them has learned how to react to suicidal risk or harm. A lot of them have gone on to psychology, psychotherapy. A lot of them are in places of power in Lithuania, like in health ministry and other sorts of ministries where they are regulating the mental health space in the country. So I think the legacy that we have is very broad, not only defined by the people that we answered directly, but also, the volunteers that are spreading the message that we have.
So what advice could we give for the person or a volunteer who is entering to the new workplace or organization? I have an answer that for me it's easy to build a connection in the beginning, but for me it's hard to be energetic and extroverted for a long time. So I'm trying to build a relationship as fast as possible and then to just have check-in because I don't have that much energy to be in a team, to be surrounded by people for long periods of time. But speaking from the workplace, I felt like everyone is getting to know each other and they are trying each other's boundaries. And I changed my job pretty recently, and I felt like I built these boundaries of my work schedule, of the projects that I'm having. For instance, I do not take calls after my work hours, or if I'm getting a call and I know this is the important person, I'm telling, okay, I'm already out of work. We need something urgent. I have colleagues that are taking calls and they are speaking for hours, not during their working hours, and they become resentful because they didn't put the boundary. So I think putting some boundaries also in the beginning is good, because otherwise it's a little bit strange to do it after a longer period of time and be like, oh, that's something new.
Yes.
But it's possible.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize, especially starting like a new job or a volunteering opportunity. These are great questions that we went through them. Also to ask yourself the questions that what I want from that, especially volunteering. You go there because it's a resource, because you want to give something to other people who may not have it. So it's very helpful to ask yourself whether it's volunteering or it's a job, what I'm expecting from it, because it's usually okay. If it's a job, we are expecting probably money, maybe like purposeful work. Volunteering, yes, we were looking for a purpose. Are we looking for like friendships or just a non-toxic environment or something like that? When we can recognize our own expectations, what we want to get from it, it's easier to go looking for it. If I'm looking for, okay, I want not only to have a purposeful job, but I want also colleagues that I can joke around about, which is a very important thing usually in the context of a job. Okay, maybe I can start looking for that. Maybe I can look which people I can have a talk with during coffee or something like that. What's the saying is usually look for the helpers. There are people who are haters or who don't want to talk to you, but look for the helpers, because there are always some people around that could help you, that maybe have been in that job or in that volunteering opportunity for a long time. They can maybe be like a mentor or a friend or a big brother, big sister or something like that. I also agree with the boundaries thing, because especially when we are starting things first, the lines can be very blurred. The boundaries can be extremely hard to figure out. So yeah, having these boundaries, I have this very strong boundary that I don't take work calls after my work hours, but sometimes I just log out of the social networks for a weekend so that I couldn't be reached in any way possible. Knowing what works for you, and also just trying and failing. Maybe having no boundaries works for me. For example, I know people that, okay, they start their jobs at 9 o'clock, but they have a flexible schedule, for example, and in the middle of the day, I don't know, they nap or something. Some have this opportunity and they finish their jobs at 9 p.m. maybe. So the boundaries can be very blurred. But again, asking yourself what I'm expecting, what is this an environment that I'm going to get it, or is it not? Because if it's a remote work, maybe I won't find any colleagues, but maybe I may find them. So yeah, just knowing what I expect, and also how can I protect myself and not merge into my work, because it's also a struggle that I think especially young people face, going to their work full time and not having any social life or any life outside of work. You just work and sleep and nothing in between.
I was hearing a thought that we tend to hear this pressure, let's say, from society, from the parents, that if you are going to study hard, if you're going to work hard, but no one is telling that we can do the same, but pleasantly. See, you can study joyfully and enjoy the process. You can go to work, volunteer, and try to find the joy there. It's what you're looking for. Sometimes the attitude can help.
So I totally agree with both of your ideas. What I would recommend for people that are going to the place for the first time is to be open. Myself, I'm quite open usually, and I got even criticized by other people because I was open, and for them it seemed that I will be harmed. But I'm till this day not harmed by that. But what is helping me is just, it's not openness that I'm telling like about my feeling to everyone, but to just be open about all the activities that is happening and go there and explore, take some part and see how other people are, what are they doing, what they are thinking, make connections and so on. It's just a new environment. For sure it's uncomfortable, but when you will go, I believe you will learn a lot, and from that point it will be just easier and easier, as some of you told before.
Yeah, so I felt we had a pretty nice conversation about emotional intelligence and importance of it, and maybe some questions helped us to realize where can we improve this skill. And as every skill, it's just like a muscle, you can train it. And as you can see, we encourage you to do that in order to use it at your volunteering process, at your work, and probably at your family and life.
See you in the next episodes. Goodbye, listeners.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.